At some point day, you are going to look in a mirror. You will see a face, your face. It will feel obvious, permanent, inevitable, like it could not have been any other way. But there is a question that has been haunted philosophers, geneticists, and ancient storytelling traditions across every civilization on the earth. A question so unsettling that most people instinctively look away from it the moment it appears. What if you are never supposed to exist? Not in a dark way, not as an insect, but as a statistical evolutionary ancestral fact. The odds that you said specifically the version of you standing in front of that mirror would you ever come into being were so astronomically small that the universe had no reason to expect you. And here is the part that changes everything. Your ancestors knew this, not in the language of genetics or probability theory, but in their bones, in their rituals, in the stories they told around five, tens of thousands of years before anyone had a word for DNA. Think about what it takes for you to exist. Your mother had to be born, her mother before her mother's mother before that. Follow the chain back just 10 generations, roughly 250 years, and you already have over a thousand direct ancestors whose survival, whose choices, whose proximity to one another on any given afternoon shaped whether you would ever draw a single breath. Go back 100 generations, 1,000, the number of specific people who had to live, meet, survive illness, avoid violence, and choose each other in exactly the right sequence to produce you becomes a number of a so large it stops feel like mathematics and starts feeling like myth. The revolutionary biologist Richard Dawkins once described this as the river of genes, a continuous flowing thread of biological information stretching back not just to the first humans, but to the first living things on this planet. Every organism in the chain had to survive long enough to reproduce. Every single one. If any link breaks, the river stops, and you are never in it. That is not a metaphor, that is biology. Now, here is where it gets strange, where the science starts to sound like something ancient people already understood, told in a different language. In 2022, a team of researchers at the University of Cambridge published a study on what they called existential inheritance, the psychological weight that modern humans carry when they contemplate the sheer improbability of their own birth. The study found that people who deeply engaged with this question, who sat with the full force of their own statistical unlikeliness, consistently reported something unexpected. Not anxiety, not despair, something that looked in brain imaging and in self-report almost exactly like, oh, the same activation pattern you see when someone stands at the edge of the Grand Canyon, when someone hears music that makes the hair on their arms stand up, when someone watches a child take their first steps. Your brain apparently responds to the fact of your own existence the same way it responds to encountering something vast and rare and irreplaceable, which raises a question worth sitting with for a moment. If your existence is genuinely this unlikely, if it requires millions of precisely aligned events across hundreds of thousands of years, what exactly does that mean for how you are spending your Thursday afternoon? Your ancestors had a version of this question too, and they answered it with ritual. Across cultures, so geographically separated they could not possibly have borrowed from one another. Anthropologists have found a recurring pattern. Japanese tradition of Ohokamare, visiting the graves of ancestors, involves a specific acknowledgement that your body carries the physical continuation of people who are gone, that the fact of your presence at that grave is itself a kind of completeness of their existence. The West African Akan tradition holds that each person is a literal embodiment of ancestral spirit, not metaphorically, but as a cosmological belief that the living are the most recent iteration of something that has been trying to exist for a very long time. The Norse concept of Hemingsa, often translated as luck or fortune, was understood not as something you are born with, but as something passed through bloodliness, the accumulated survival energy of everyone who had to make it through for you to be here. You are not lucky is isolation. You are lucky because they were. These traditions, separated by oceans and centuries, all arrived at the same strange truth. You are not a beginning, you are a continuation. The anthropologist David Graeber, before his death in 2020, wrote extensively about what he called the cosmological anchor, the deep human need to feel that one's existence is not random, that is a part of something. He argued that this need is not a weakness, not a cognitive bias to be corrected by rationalism, but an adaptive feature of the human psyche. The people who felt their existence was part of a chain were more likely to act in ways that extended the chain, more likely to protect their community, more likely to pass something forward. In other words, believing you were meant to exist, even without evidence, even on pure feeling, may have been one of the things that kept humans alive long enough to develop evidence based thinking in the first place. Hold that thought. Because here is the counterintuitive twist that is, whole question has been willing toward. You are not inevitable. That much is true. The math is unambiguous and the biology is brutal. A single deviation at any point in that chain, and the specific pattern that produces your face, your laugh, your particular way of getting frustrated when you cannot find your keys, never coalesces, it never gets the chance. But, and this is the part of that changes the frame entirely, neither was anyone else. The person sitting next to you on the bus, the barista who handed you your coffee this morning, the stranger in a photograph you will never see, every single human being alive right now is the product of the same impossible chain. Every person who has ever lived was the terminus of a million precise alignments that could have broken a thousands of different ways. This means something important. Your existence is not special in the sense of being chosen or destined, but it is special in the precise sense that every conscious experience of being alive is a statistical anomaly so extreme it borders on the impossible. The philosopher Derek Parfit spent much of his career on this exact problem, what he called the non-identity problem. The idea that had any of the circumstances leading to your birth been different, even slightly, you would not exist and someone else, a different person entirely, would be here in your place. There is no version of events where your particular configuration of self comes into being through a different path. The path is you. Parfit argued that this should change how we feel about our lives. Not make us feel chosen, not make us feel special in a way that separates us from others, but make us feel something closer to what that Cambridge study found, something like radical and specific gratitude, the kind that does not need a recipient, the kind that is simply the appropriate emotional response to understanding what it took. Your ancestors sat by fires and told stories about this feeling without knowing the science. They watched children be born and understood intuitively that something improbable had just happened again, that the chain had held, that whatever combination of survival and luck and love had carried the line forward had done it one more time. They buried their death with objects, with food, with ochre painted on bones, not because they were confused about death, but because they understood that the person in the ground was part of the same chain, that their survival had made all the future survival possible, that they deserved acknowledgement for that. You are carrying something that took hundreds of thousands of years to reach you. Most days, that feels like nothing. Most days, it is just a face in the mirror, just the hum of existing, just one more hour in a sequence of hours that seems like it will go and more or less indefinitely. But every so often, when something stops you still, when you catch yourself feeling without a clear reason, grateful simply to be awake. That is not sentiment, that is not irrationality, that is not oldest and most accurate thing your nervous system knows how to say. It says, the chain held against every odd, through every disruption, across every century, and catastrophe and quite ordinary afternoon where everything could have gone differently and did not, the chain held and it held all the way to you. So the next time you look in the mirror at the face that feels so obvious, so permanent, so inevitable, you will know something different now. It was none of those things. It was a miracle in the only sense that word can mean something true, and it is looking back to you.